Man, two-set violin is so cool. They somehow make classical music popular again. I mean, I've always loved classical music, and with how fun their videos are, it kind of makes me want to learn how to play the violin too. I mean, the violin seems almost approachable now. But I want to. But alas, the violin was bought from Wish. It does not work. No, I won't play a single note. The strings won't stay in tune. I mean, the thing feels like it could break if I touch it wrong. So what's the point? Is there any way for me to ever make violin music? I can't see one. But let me think. Wait. So in order to make the air violin, I used Max 8, and I used a pressure sensor. And these two sensors, although they're not filled out right now because the device isn't plugged in, they're both defaulted for accelerometers, which is going to measure how you're turning the device. So this one is when you're holding the bow up or down, and this is going to set a range from 0 to 12. These numbers will eventually go into scale degree, which will assign each of these numbers to a note on our little keyboard here. And more specifically, they'll assign notes within any of these scales we choose. So if you want to do a Dorian scale, then it will play that scale. But before we get to the scale degree, we have a smooth function, because these, even though you set the range of the sensor output, it can be a little jumpy. How fast do you want the notes to change is kind of up to you, so you can change the sensitivity here until it's about where you liked. I like them both at 4 and 4 because you can still get some fast note changes, but the really bad jumping around goes away. From here, we can go down and see that scale degree, these notes that you're playing, is now outputting a MIDI number. This we put into a MIDI to frequency object. So this is going to just show us what frequency we're at. And this we're going to add to this. We have the other accelerometer that's coming through here that is going to be set at a range from -10 to 10. And that is going to just signify a frequency. So -10 to 10, that is a frequency that we're putting in as our quote-unquote modular frequency, which is basically going to add the vibrato. You can set this range to be higher, but it gets kind of wonky when you make it too high, and you want it to be negative to positive of the same number, so that when you're holding the bow straight, it is not having any vibrato at all, and then when you turn it to either side, you get vibrato. So that is going to come in here to this modular frequency, and it gets multiplied by 2. You can mess with this again if you don't want to deal with changing both numbers here. This is just going to multiply this frequency by whatever your depth is. So again, you can play around with it to whatever you liked. I thought 2 sounded just about right. And here we have another sensor that's not coming from here. In fact, if we look, coming from the device, we have our pressure sensor. Now the pressure sensor is going to be doing a couple of things. One, we see it coming into this range setter from 0 to 100, and it controls our volume. So, as you would expect, if it's 0, if you're not pressing the pressure sensor, there's no sound, and if you are pressing the sensor, it's at max volume. Another place this comes out is over here, which we will get to this later. But if you go to the other range setter, we are outputting a value from 0 to 1. And that's coming over here to output amplitude. This helps add a little bit of extra depth to our vibrato, where the louder we are playing our note, the more we are allowing our vibrato to come through. Because 1 signifies when the volume is at 100, and 0, we would be multiplying this modulator frequency by 0 if it was quiet, or by a very small number if we're playing very quietly. So this doesn't come through as much. And this is added to our carrier frequency. We don't want to multiply it to our carrier frequency because then we're going to get very, very high or very, very low notes. So you add it, so you add a little bit of up and down to the note. And you put that here into the cycle object, which basically just takes your frequencies and makes it a output sound. But before we hook that up to our handy dandy speaker over here, we're going to put it over here first. This is a very nifty object called Simple FM. Basically, you can take in your note, which right now we are just outputting a sound now. It's no longer a frequency. And we can then change how it sounds. Now, this is a lot of plug and play to see what sounds right to you. I was trying my best to make the sound of a violin, so that's where these numbers come from. Of course, you can make sounds that sound just like a bell or a clarinet, but I was hoping to just sound like any sort of instrument that wasn't some alien beeping noise, which was the default of when you just hook up a sound directly into the speaker here. Now we can look at this branch. So this is a similar setup to the vibrato over here. It's set up almost identically, only this is going to change what our modulation index is. Now, our modulation index, the higher you go, the more the sound changes. I had it set to 186, but anywhere from probably 180 to 195 sounded kind of like a violin. But when it's just set at 186 by itself, the note sounds kind of flat. So, when I hooked that up to our pressure sensor, when we change our volume, which also, let you know, changes our vibrato, is going to change what our modulation index is set to. So it's going to almost add a vibrato to what kind of sound we are having. This is changing the pitch by adding a frequency. This is changing our modulation index, which is changing the kind of sound we have. But when you combine that with the vibrato, it makes the vibrato not sound as fake and makes it a little bit more noticeable to the ear. And then all you have to do is get this output, hook it up in here with your volume, and then output to your speaker, and just like that, you have an air violin.